Thank you. I'm going to talk about addressing the impact of cognitive impairment on everyday functioning through personalised, goal-oriented cognitive rehabilitation. I'll start by focusing on what cognitive rehabilitation for people with dementia is and why it's relevant. And then I'll review the evidence that we have from research and implementation studies. And I'll then go on to think about some of the challenges in getting this kind of approach implemented into practice and how we might overcome some of those challenges. So what is cognitive rehabilitation for people with dementia and why is it relevant? Rehabilitation aims to enable people to function at the best possible level given their condition and the impairments that they have. And cognitive rehabilitation is a type of rehabilitation that specifically addresses the impact of cognitive impairment on everyday functioning. When we apply that for people living with dementia, it's in the form of a goal-oriented, personalised behavioural intervention that's carried out on a one-to-one basis in the person's normal place of residence, and carers are fully involved and supported wherever possible. We do this in the person's home or normal place of residence because that is where they need to use the learning and the strategies that are developed through this approach, and it avoids the need for transferring that learning from one situation to another, which is always problematic. So why is cognitive rehabilitation relevant for people with dementia? Well, in dementia, we know that the cognitive impairment that is central to the condition leads to limitations on engaging in activity and restrictions on social participation. So it creates a degree of disability. And in addition, there is a component very often of excess disability the person doesn't need to have. And this can be due both to more personal factors like loss of confidence or low mood, and also to more extrinsic factors such as negative reactions from other people or environments that are poorly adapted and don't support and enable the person to function well. So we can do something about disability, and we need to come at it from two angles. Firstly, we need to think obviously about equipping the person to manage that disability, and we also need to think about the environment and the context the person is in. Now, in cognitive rehabilitation, we're focusing primarily on equipping the person to manage well, but the other aspect does come in too. And why is this important? Well, how well you can function day to day is very central to quality of life and well-being. Here in this lower right-hand panel, I've plotted, this is data from our ideal cohort study of people living with dementia. And I've plotted level of functional disability from lowest to highest here against standardised scores on quality of life, satisfaction with life and well-being. And what you can see is that as functional ability declines, so too these perceptions of what we might call ability to live well with the condition also reduce. So whatever stage the person is at, enabling them to function optimally is going to be important for quality of life and well-being. Now, in this talk, I'm going to focus on people living with mild to moderate dementia, but I do want to emphasise that the principles of cognitive rehabilitation are applicable across the spectrum, I think from very mild cognitive impairment to advanced dementia, but the way that that's operationalised will be different depending on the stage and severity of dementia and the particular needs the person has. So I'm going to be focusing mainly on, as I said, people with mild to moderate dementia and also with the more typical dementias, Alzheimer's disease, vascular and mixed dementia primarily. But again, this can also be adapted to the particular needs of people with rarer forms of dementia. How does cognitive rehabilitation work in practice? Well, the practitioner will want to start by understanding what is important to the person and how is functional disability creating challenges and making it difficult for the person to do those things that are important. So the practitioner will want to understand the whole that whole picture, but then they will work with the person to collaboratively identify specific SMART goal or goals. So the goal must be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and relevant, and time bound, so achievable within a defined period of time. The practitioner will evaluate how the person is doing in that area at the moment and where difficulties are coming. For example, it might be that the person doesn't get started at all because they don't have confidence, or it might be that they get muddled up in the middle of a sequence of steps, or perhaps they've never learned to do this particular thing properly and need to learn a new skill in order to get around a difficulty. So the practitioner will evaluate how the person is doing currently and then develop the rehabilitation plan, selecting from a range of evidence-based strategies, either for managing particular activities, or for example, or for taking in and retaining and using information. That plan will be implemented, including practice between sessions where possible with family support, and progress towards attaining the goal will be evaluated, and the plan might be adjusted if necessary. Now, to facilitate this process of goal setting, there are various structured interviews available. We use the Bangor goal setting interview, that's one that we developed, which allows us to identify the goals and have the person rate how they are doing on a very simple 1 to 10 scale. And then that rating can also be replicated by the family carer or indeed the practitioner. And it can be used as a baseline, which can be compared to ratings made after the plan has been implemented. So I just want to put that more into context by giving you an example. So here we have a person living with dementia who wants to be able to go out alone, for example, to the shops as she used to, but she is anxious and lacks confidence. So after various discussions around how to address this goal, this aim, one specific goal that arose was for her to learn to use a simple mobile phone so that she could go out, take the phone and call her husband if she felt anxious when she was out on her own or if something untoward happened. So how did the practitioner tackle this? Well, first of all, we have anxiety in there, and that's really important. And these emotional challenges sometimes have to be addressed first. So there was a component of proactively dealing with feelings of anxiety and teaching anxiety management strategies, including breathing techniques and self-talk. Then we have new learning, in fact. So here the practitioner introduces enhanced learning strategies to enable the person to learn to make and receive calls. So here, action-based learning and expanding rehearsal with family support. The person observed the steps involved, observed the practitioner modelling them. With the practitioner, created a written sheet of steps, rehearsed those steps until she no longer needed the prompts. Practice making calls at home, leaving longer periods of time between each practice, and then gradually practiced under increasingly challenging conditions away from home. There were a few other things that came in here as well. First of all, to use the phone effectively, she needed to take it with her. So there were prompts by the front door to set up this habit of taking the phone. And then she needed to be able to make the call easily. So she had to change how she carried her belongings. She had to use a shoulder bag where she could keep both hands free to use the phone. And because we were aware that there were challenges about poor attention and concentration in particular, she was also taught to find a quiet place to make her calls. So just an example there of how the practitioner will work on a particular goal. So what evidence do we have for this approach? Well, when I started working with this approach, it was a matter of adapting work that was being done in the brain injury field, and we began by talking to people about what they wanted. We had access to memory clinics, some people getting involved in some of the very early drug trials, and then thought about how to adapt this approach for them. So this is just some examples of the first case studies we did to establish whether this was feasible. So this top two panels are someone who learnt names of people at his social group to stop him opting out because he was embarrassed. So I taught him the names one by one. He learnt them very well. maintained that for 6 months following completion. And then over the following year, I continued to test him from time to time, and he managed to maintain that knowledge of the names and was able to retrieve them correctly. In the lower left panel, you can see this is someone who learned to use a calendar to know what day it was and what was happening today, rather than asking her husband, who was becoming quite irritated by repetitive questions. Again, she managed that very well, and that behavioural change was maintained again at 6-month follow-up. Might seem like a small thing, but it did make a difference to both of them, and they were able to then apply some of that problem-solving approach to other issues that came up. And then this bottom right panel is this shows results from 6 people who worked on either 1 or 2 goals, and just shows the percentage of goal attainment that was recorded at the end, and you could see that they all improved relative to baseline. So we saw that this was feasible to do, and that led to an initial small randomized trial for people with mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease, an MMSE score of 18 or above. We randomized 69 people, to one of 3 conditions. And all of them identified goals and rated their performance in relation to those goals at baseline, the blue bars, and following the intervention, which was an 8-week intervention, the orange bars. And the 3 conditions were cognitive rehabilitation, an active control group, which had relaxation therapy, and usual treatment. And you can see that in the active control and the usual treatment group, there were no changes in those goal ratings, but there was a significant change in the cognitive rehabilitation group, who worked with the practitioner on those goals. We did see a few other benefits too, including some improvements in cognition and mood, and more positive quality of life ratings by both participants and family members. Also in that trial, we were able to look at whether there were changes in brain functioning. Now, this is not my area of expertise, but we compared people from the cognitive rehabilitation group to people from the other 2 control conditions. And a tentative conclusion was that cognitive rehabilitation may have contributed to partial restoration of function in frontal brain areas. We were able to do a similar randomized trial for people with Parkinson's disease dementia and Lewy body dementia. There was a small number of people. We randomized 29 people. And here we've introduced a third set of follow-up, which is following on from the post-intervention orange bars. The grey bar shows the 6-month follow-up ratings. And we also have ratings made by family carers as well. So we have the same 3 conditions, cognitive rehabilitation participants on the left, active control in the middle, usual treatment on the right, and on this side are the participants themselves, and on the right the carer ratings. So again, we can see no significant change at all in the active control or usual treatment, but in the cognitive rehabilitation group we see significant improvement in ratings, and those are maintained at 6-month follow-up, and that pattern is absolutely mirrored by the carer ratings, albeit they're slightly lower. So we saw also some other benefits, such as more positive quality of life ratings by both participants and family members. So the initial evidence allowed us to get secure funding to carry out a large randomized controlled trial. This was the GREAT trial, and it asked whether cognitive rehabilitation is beneficial for people with early stage Alzheimer's, vascular or mixed dementia. We had 8 trial sites in England and Wales. We randomized 475 people with mild to moderate dementia, again, MMSE score of 18 or above, each with a family member as study partner to provide those ratings, and they were recruited over a 3-year period between 2013 and 2016. In this trial, we compared cognitive rehabilitation with treatment as usual. We didn't have an active control condition that was considered to have already been addressed. So here we have self-ratings and carer ratings, the same initial post-intervention and follow-up at 6 months. So the cognitive rehabilitation group on the left and the usual treatment group on the right. And again, we see no significant change in usual treatment and the same significant change in the cognitive rehabilitation group, mirrored by the carers. Just a couple of examples of goals that were successfully addressed. John learned to overcome his fear of using household appliances, mobile phones and other technology. Doris regained the confidence to collect her pension and managed to stay safe by remembering to lock her door at night. Shahid felt better able to engage in conversation with his family and took up photography again. And Gareth learnt to cook his own meals without burning the food, enabling him to stay independent. So these are findings from our trials. What about the evidence more generally? Well, we've been carrying out a Cochrane review. It's not published yet, but I can share the findings here. So in terms of immediate outcomes, that's to say the end of intervention, we see this large effect in the functional ability on the targeted activities, both self-rated and carer-rated, and then small effects in self-efficacy, which we saw as an underlying mechanism, immediate recall, and carer quality of life. In terms of medium-term outcomes, so follow-ups, these range between 3 and 12 months, depending on the study design, typically 6 months. Again, we see that same effect in targeted activities maintained as rated by both the person and carer. Some small benefits in cognition, this time attention, and small benefits for carer quality of life. What about longer term outcomes? Well, there's only one study that really speaks to this, and this is the ATNA-3 trial conducted in France. This trial compared 3 interventions to treatment as usual, and all of those 4 conditions had carer support built in. So the 3 interventions were group reminiscence, group cognitive training, and individual goal-oriented cognitive rehabilitation. All of them were given weekly for 3 months, and then 6 weekly for 21 months, and outcomes were assessed at 24 months. So relative to usual care, group cognitive training and group reminiscence showed no benefits at all. But cognitive rehabilitation, that's the top line here, the brown line, showed a less functional decline and a 6-month delay in institutionalization relative to usual care. So the authors concluded that individualized, personalized interventions of this kind were what we should be doing. So we were fortunate enough to gain funding from Alzheimer's Society in the UK to work on implementation. So we were funded to look at building a foundation for implementation of this approach in healthcare services. And this project was severely affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. So the results are, as we had our results were less extensive than we had originally hoped. However, we were able to report results, and we trained staff in 11 UK National Health Service teams to offer great cognitive rehabilitation. And despite the pandemic, 54 people with dementia each had an average of 6 home visits from a practitioner and contributed to our evaluation. There were others who did not contribute to the evaluation. And if you look on the right-hand panel, you can see we have here the same ratings, the pre-intervention and post-intervention ratings by the person with dementia, family member, and this time also the cognitive rehabilitation practitioner, again on our scale of 0 to 10. And the person with dementia and family member and practitioner ratings are very similar, in fact, and again show this improvement in functioning in the targeted activities. Almost everyone said that this was useful and would recommend it to others. And these are some examples of what people said about cognitive rehabilitation. So people with dementia, I've become more independent and now will go out on my own regularly. I've attempted volunteering in a charity shop and I get shopping on my own. I didn't know how to use my mobile phone and now I do. More confidence, boosted my feelings about myself, more secure. Carers also had positive things to say. Mum has mastered using both the washing machine and her mobile phone and has gained confidence. This has taken pressure off me as Mum's first point of contact. It taught me how to cope with my husband's memory loss more patiently. A big difference, a good outcome by realising there are different strategies to manage the problems we face which do help, just finding the right strategies and implementing them. And practitioners too. The person-centred approach means that it can make a big difference to daily life as the goals are meaningful to the person. That it allowed creativity in my work was brilliant. I loved it and still do, and if I had the chance I would do a lot more of it. In terms of our team cohesion and our purpose in the roles we were in, it just strengthened, I think, our role confidence. So very positive outcomes in those respects, and in terms of the improvements that we saw, perhaps even more marked than in the trial. However, there were, of course, challenges to implementation, and so I'd like to focus on that a bit, because I think it's really important that we get these kinds of evidence into practice and make good use of them. So one area where challenges arose were in attitudes and practices. So our practitioners talked about attitudes of colleagues, the attitudes perhaps of some of our colleagues, you know, the sort of medical lead of our research department. I probably don't want to say too much about that. Taking time to get senior managers aware and interested. So these were the more personal aspects, but then also the way that services are set up. And in the UK, services are commissioned to do specific things and funded to do specific things. And so in many cases, they're funded to provide a service that is basically making a diagnosis and then following up with medication, but not psychosocial interventions. So that is a challenge for us. The prioritising, services may have limited resources and therefore the priority goes to people in crisis, and that doesn't leave much scope for these more preventive areas of work. So how do we change that? Well, I noticed that there is an increasing awareness of the rehabilitation model and an understanding that it can be applied and is relevant for people with dementia. So just a couple of examples that I've been involved in: the International Federation on Aging summit in 2016 on reablement in older people included a whole section on people living with dementia. And then last year, the World Health Organization put together its package of rehabilitation interventions for dementia, which essentially involved looking at every possible conceivable aspect of human functioning in relation to health and well-being, and identifying what interventions and supports were available and the resources needed to implement them. That was intended to act as a stimulus to improve service provision. And I think, you know, it is very difficult to make this shift from reactive to proactive preventive work, but there is a growing awareness of the need for this, and so these are some UK examples, an understanding that we need to be working together to prevent difficulties rather than waiting for crises to happen. A complex picture, of course, of all the things that need to be in place, but here, you know, obviously practitioners being able to identify and address needs is a crucial part of that. And then very much in our National Health Service, there's been a focus on personalisation, so an understanding that care should be personalised, that it should focus around what matters to the person. And you know, there are a whole range of things again that need to be in place to make this happening, including personalised care and support planning and enabling. And for this has not been adapted. The thinking of how to adapt this to people with dementia hasn't really been done, but it does open the way to consider the role of rehabilitative work. Availability of practitioners is another important point. Certainly we need enough people who are trained in this way to be able to do this kind of work. and that can be difficult. And those people who are trained need to gather confidence and feel capable, and so they need support to develop their skills. There are many professionals who have the capability to deliver this kind of approach, but they may need particular specific training, a small amount perhaps, but of training to get them into that way of working. And to not be discouraged when things get in the way. For example, with people with dementia, a physical illness can disrupt the process, and that can be discouraging for practitioners too. So it's a skill for them, and also the person with dementia needs to be in the right place to be able to engage. In our work, we developed a whole training pathway for practitioners, but as a foundation and to make this more widely available, we have developed an e-learning course which is available in the UK on the National Health Service Learning Hub, but for others it is also available on our website, so it can be accessed by anyone and followed, and that provides access to some resources for practitioners, such as this booklet about how to tackle different kinds of goals, or the kinds of things practitioners might want to think about. It's not a prescription, but it's a set of considerations so that practitioners can come up with the best possible plan. We will need to make sure that people are more aware of this approach, and perhaps in particular people living with dementia and carers should be aware of it so that they can be asking for it and highlight its availability and encourage services to think about providing it. And that's something that our practitioners emphasised in our own work. So one of the things that we have tried to do is explain this approach to people living with dementia by providing a short animation that's available on our website. I can't play it to you now, but you are very welcome to have a look on our website and play it there. Engaging people living with dementia in this endeavour, we also thought that these principles could possibly be translated to support self-management. And so we work with a team of people living with dementia, 9 of them, you can see them here, to develop a resource for others which offers some guidance and advice and examples on how to apply these principles. We explained the principles and they went away essentially and came up with this amazing resource. They wanted to give a message of hope to other people living with dementia that there are some things you can do to manage the difficulties that you face. So this is My Life, My Goals, and My Life, My Goals is available on our Living with Dementia toolkit. And interestingly, we're seeing this being picked up also by practitioners who may be short of time, and we're using this to work with people living with dementia to help start to get them able to use this approach and think through and tackle some of the challenges that they're facing. So what about next steps? Where do we go from here? Well, we've seen that cognitive rehabilitation can improve or maintain specific everyday skills and activities and may have important long-term benefits. So this can contribute to post-diagnostic support alongside other elements at relatively modest cost. Now, it is not the only answer and it is not necessary for everyone, but it can form a part of that offer. And the principles can be translated to support self-management. However, there are still challenges to overcome if services are going to provide a rehabilitation-based model of personalised support, which is what I would like to see happening from the time of diagnosis onwards, and focus on enabling people living with dementia to function as well as they possibly can. So this is where I think we need to focus in the next stages. And I'd just like to end by acknowledging all of the many people who've contributed to this area of research and programme of research. And I'll conclude by just leaving you with some sources of further information. Thank you very much.